Hey V, it's been 5 years. Remember 2020? Your optics were glitching and Night City was falling apart. But a city like this doesn't stay broken for long. New systems, new pipelines, new core. I pushed the latest build to your HUD. Your job's simple. Line up the past with what we got now. See if it lives up to the promise that they sold us back in 2018. If not, we rebuild the view ourselves. Don't keep me waiting, V. Hi everyone, it's been 5 years since the launch of Cyberpunk 2077, a release that will undoubtedly go down in history. Infamous for its technical shortcomings, yet celebrated for its stories, characters, and soundtrack. Today, we are revisiting Night City to see how path tracing compares to the first look of the game from 2018. What happened to the game's performance after 5 years of patches, and how the in-game path tracing solution compares with rendering in Blender. My name is Monza, and together with FrameLeap, we are going to find the answers. We can't begin this video without a quick story of Cyberpunk 2077's troubled development, a saga that stretched nearly a decade, picking up speed after The Witcher 3 release. The goal was unprecedented, a dense, seamless, open world built on Red Engine, designed for both high-end PCs and base consoles like PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. Cyberpunk 2077 was announced in May 2012, before the PS4 or Xbox One was even announced. The first teaser dropped in January 2013, a CGI trailer set to Archive's bullets, ending with the ominous promise, coming when it's ready. For the next 5 years, the game barely existed in public. CDPR was focused on The Witcher 3, Wild Hunt. Then in 2018, it was re-revealed at E3.
Of walking the streets of the future is really going to be breathtaking. You're breathtaking. You're all breathtaking.
We saw an in-game engine trailer, and behind closed doors, the full demo was shown to the press. This is the demo that set the standard for the infamous downgrade. Multiple in-game choices that affect the story, and mechanics cut before launch, like wall running, vehicle customization, advanced NPC lifestyles, and much more. The first release date, April 2020, kicked off a cascade of 3 major delays, each justified by a need for polishing and balancing. This was compounded by the notorious crunch controversy. Despite prior assurances of a non-mandatory crunch policy, reports from late 2020 confirmed that developers were mandated to work 6-day weeks to meet the final deadline. The final result of this frantic final push was the 1.03 release. On PC, the game was playable, though unstable, but on base consoles, the experience was catastrophic. Game-breaking bugs, frame rate issues, all these technical failures led to the unprecedented corporate consequence. Sony delisted the game from the PlayStation Store in December 2020, an act reserved only for extreme quality control failures. This single event defines the low bar from which we measure the technical progress of 2.31. Let's start by looking at the E3 2018 footage that we upscaled to 4K for fair comparison. When we look at the E3 2018 version, it has a softer, more vibrant color palette thanks to a unique LUT. In contrast, the path trace version is sharper, with more defined contrast, but less warmth. As we see, the current version with path tracing offers a much richer depth, but at the price of the cinematic feeling we saw before. So let's try to restore the original tone we remember. For that, we turn to the modding community. First, we have to talk about Essenthy. He's a legend in the scene, the man behind the Witcher 3 Super Turbo lighting mod. His CyberLighting E3 2018 restoration project is vital because it reworks the weather and tone mapping to restore that specific sodium vapor 2018 atmosphere. In the same scene, it still doesn't perfectly match. There's a deeper contrast at times, but overall, it captures more of that original mood or even improves on it, especially in the scene where Trauma Team arrives to save the patient. But Essenthy wasn't the only one who decided to try restoring the famous demo. Now in the next comparison, we'll look at another modder's take. This is the closest restoration we've seen yet, mod by Lexar, and we'll break down what makes it stand out. As we switch to the next footage, we see the car scene again. Lexar's approach softens the overall look even more, reducing contrast and bringing back that gentle vibe closer to the original E3 mood. He brought back the original unused NPC looks, missing billboards, and environmental details that were part of the 2018 vision. While comparing both mods against the original E3 2018 footage, we see that in specific scenarios they prioritize different pillars of the 2018 look. Lexar's E3 2018 lighting mod focuses primarily on color science and filmic tone mapping. It effectively recreates the desaturated, gritty, clinical palette seen in the Trauma Team scene. On the road, Lexar brings back the dirty texture and soft sky, though it can sometimes result in flatter shadows compared to the high contrast original. Essenthy's CyberLighting mod prioritizes luminous energy and bloom. In the Trauma Team Extraction, Essenthy captures the overexposed hot sunlight that defined the early marketing. On the overpass, it leans into aggressive light glow and high contrast shadows, giving the world a more vibrant, high noon intensity. However, it's important to note that Lexar's mod was just released recently. It was unpublished on Nexus Mods back in September 2025, and every new game patch breaks it, so the creator spent a lot of time for its rebuild. Worth keeping in mind if suddenly CDPR decides to release one more patch. It's always fascinating to see how games have progressed since their initial release, how the developers managed to improve or reduce the performance of online games, or in our case, Cyberpunk 2077. In order to make a fair comparison, we will use the native anti-aliasing solution, since the DLSS version may have a different performance impact, and compare the game in identical scenarios, including an open world and compact locations. Let's start with low preset at 4K. As we see here in the scene with Dexter Deshawn, the latest version is actually running better. We get around 10 FPS more. That's 150 versus 140 FPS. In the open world, the difference can be even higher, in some cases, even an extra 25 FPS on the latest version. With the high preset, the situation is the opposite. The release version is getting 5 to 10 FPS higher in identical conditions, 40 versus 50 FPS. The 1.03 version often pushes higher numbers simply because it's missing multiple effects, like in this scene, or the issues with low LOD, or when even some high settings actually use low settings, like this example with space screen reflections. In 2.31, we're dealing with a revamped asset streaming and multiple new effects that weren't active before. Let's try to compare both versions with the new version of DLSS 4.5. In 4K high preset and DLSS at performance, the 1.03 version gets more FPS due to the reasons we talked about before. While 1.03 is lighter on the GPU, it was plagued by those early launch issues. Not only were we missing some effects, but faced broken NPC reactions and a police system that famously lacked any real logic. Let's talk about path tracing and how it actually changes the scene before we compare the results with another render solution from Blender. As we're driving, look closely at the metallic surface around the dashboard. With rasterization or even with traditional ray traced reflections, the digital numbers from the dashboard simply don't appear correctly. But once we switch to full path tracing, notice what happens. The dashboard digits are now physically present in the reflection. In the release version, the game heavily relied on a hybrid approach. You had rasterized shadows and screen space reflections, SSR, doing the heavy lifting. As you can see on this example here, the SSR exhibits the typical artifacts. When V looks down, the reflections vanish because the screen space information is gone. Let's look at this scene inside Mothbar from Phantom Liberty DLC. See how light goes through the windows and bounces from the floor, and how the nearest area is also getting extra lighting. Or how in this scene with a huge amount of vegetation we are getting accurate shadow on the leaves and accurate light bouncing from the sun. We aren't just talking about better reflections, we're talking about unified lighting. The bounce lighting from the sun or neon signs now properly illuminates the alleyways, grounding the assets in reality in a way we haven't previously seen. And now let's dive deep into the most unique comparison that we've never done before. FrameLeap has spent 6 months recreating the Afterlife bar from scratch in Blender. Pure path tracing, no fake lighting, just physically based materials. Each frame takes about 20 minutes to render in Blender at 4K, but the payoff is a stunning detailed image. This comparison is not about matching the feel, it was a test of two very different render pipelines. And to top it off, here is a time lapse showing the entire process of building the Afterlife bar from scratch. Now let's compare this with the in-game version. Here is the path trace version in Cyberpunk 2077, and notice how it closely matches the mood of the Blender render. Then when we compare it to the non-path trace version, notice how it loses some of that subtlety. Now, because the bottle placement in our Blender scene differs slightly from the in-game bar, we can't do a pixel-perfect overlay. But what we can compare is how the materials themselves respond to the environment. In Blender, the material tells the light how to behave. In-game, even with path tracing, the light often has to tell the material how to look. In the next scene with the surgeon table, we see that the in-game version is dominated by a heavy volumetric scatter. It creates a thick cinematic atmosphere, but look at what it costs. The blue neon light bleeds into every corner, washing out the blacks and making the room feel like it's underwater. It's a global fix to make the lighting feel connected. Now, look at the Blender cycles. Notice the contrast. Because we aren't relying on artificial fog, the blacks are deep and ink-like. In this VIP booth, the game continues to use volume scatter. The light from the table and the overhead displays bleed into a thick blue haze, but it also hides the VIP lounge's premium details. If you check the labels on the glass panels in the path tracing version, they've almost completely blacked out. Ironically, the rasterized version, on the right, keeps the labels readable because it uses a simplified, flatter lighting model that doesn't care about deep shadows. In Blender's case, because cycles have all the time it needs, it can calculate the microscopic light bounces needed to keep that white label visible and readable. We get the physical accuracy of deep shadows without losing the texture data. On one hand, we have the real-time pipeline of Cyberpunk 2077. To stay playable at 60 FPS, the GPU has to solve the path tracing equation for the entire scene in just 16 milliseconds. On the other, we have Blender cycles. In this offline pipeline, there is no performance budget. To generate a single noise-free frame of this bar, RTX 5080 might take 20 minutes. A 20-minute render versus a 16 millisecond frame. Seeing them side by side is a testament to how far real-time technology has come. We are finally reaching a point where the visual delta between an offline render and real-time gameplay is vanishing step by step. So, what's the final call? 5 years ago, Cyberpunk 2077 launched as a contradiction, a breathtaking world buried under technical instability. Version 1.03 wasn't just rough, it was unfinished in many areas. Missing effects, broken AI systems, unstable performance. The ambition was visible, but the execution faltered under the effective management and shareholders. Today, with version 2.31, we're looking at something fundamentally different. Path tracing doesn't just improve lighting, it unifies it. The scene behaves consistently. Bounce light, reflections, shadow accuracy, everything belongs to the same physical system. Does it perfectly recreate the E3 2018 LUT heavy cinematic tone? No. But with modding, especially restoration projects inspired by that demo, we're closer than ever to bridging the gap between the promise and the product. Ironically, the current version often surpasses that original showcase in raw lighting accuracy. Cyberpunk 2077 in 2020 was ambition outrunning production reality. Cyberpunk 2077 in 2026 is redemption through iteration. It never became the exact E3 2018 build people imagined, but technically it evolved into something more impressive. A playable, path-traced open-world benchmark that stands at the frontier of real-time graphics. Night City doesn't feel broken anymore. It feels finished. V, you did a great job. The city's stable. Looks like we're not chasing the 2018 dream anymore. We built something better. Now let's see what we'll face in Cyberpunk 2.